Godblight is the third book in the Dark Imperium series, and contained within its pages are several plot points with major lore implications, all of which point towards the future direction of Warhammer 40k, and perhaps foreshadowing a looming end times. For those of you who wish to know if it is a book or audiobook worth purchasing, all I can say is simply yes. It is a fantastic story which wraps up the Indominus Crusade well and expertly balances diplomatic tension, action-packed set pieces and lore building in a wholly engaging and dynamic package. For those of you who have read the previous two books, Dark Imperium and Plague Wars, you will certainly benefit from being exposed to earlier events. That being said, author Guy Haley does a fantastic job at reintroducing key themes and character development points, which allows newcomers to the series to be well situated in the importance of events. Granted, prerequisite knowledge of Roboute Guilliman, Mortarion and the nature of Nurgle is needed in order to get the most of the dialogue heavy scenes and chapters. With that out of the way, Godblight forecasts an end times through two distinct narratives. First is the question of Roboute Guilliman's godhood. Those who appreciate the more theological aspects of 40k may find Godblight resonating with them more, as Guilliman confronts the simple question: does he have a divine purpose? Two scenes spring to mind in which this is directly debated. The first is when Guilliman speaks to his Eldari advisor and Space Marine librarian, and the second is when Guilliman confronts a preacher who is essentially founding the cult of Roboute. In both scenes, Guilliman is presented with arguments which suggest that, to mortals, he is god-like. Where Guilliman goes, victory follows. That he is the personification of divine retribution who is taking to the stars in the name of humanity to reclaim the Emperor's lost Imperium. While readers could dispel this as either the Emperor's guiding hand shaping Guilliman's path or Roboute's sheer bioarcane power, the truth remains that to the citizens of the Imperium, it is easy to believe in Roboute as an aspect of the Emperor and thus a god in the mortal realm. For those who have met Roboute, his sheer presence is so far beyond that of what is understandable and comprehensibly human that it almost becomes silly to consider that there is only one god of mankind, that being the Emperor. In both statecraft and warcraft, Guilliman's presence is so dominant, forthright and absurdly masterful that reverence of Roboute's prowess easily slips into devotion. However, Guy Haley provides some tantalising suggestions that, if Guilliman accepts his divine role, there is the possibility of utter devastation. One of the big giveaways is that Guilliman has one of the original versions of the mass-produced Lectitio Divinitatis, something that he has analysed and found fault in Lorgar's original argumentation of the Emperor as a god. When you combine this with the fact that Guilliman has an unfinished manuscript of the Codex Imperialis, the guide to the reorganisation of imperial governance, the question remains: to what extent is Guilliman going to repurpose Lorgar's script to rule the Imperium as a god king? To explicitly punctuate this point, Guy Haley has Guilliman's chief librarian have a vision in which he, and I quote, sees a bloody future where a dark mockery of Guilliman presides over an Imperium of despair and suffering. Now, the second grim portent of a 40k end times within Godblight is that chaos is once again at war between themselves. And while there has always been tension amongst the four gods, this book quite explicitly states that the previous accords are now null and void. This is given particular attention in a handful of chapters, the most direct of which details the beginning of a Tzeentchian incursion on a Nurgle demon world. In another chapter, Typhus demands that Mortarion gives up on trying to kill Guilliman, as Nurgle demands them both to deal with the Tzeentchian incursion. Typhus, having withdrawn those forces more loyal to him as the Herald of Nurgle, tells Mortarion that he is at risk of losing Nurgle's favour if he continues to ignore their patron god's demands. There is a palpable sense that this war between the gods is more important to them than the predilections of demon primarchs, even if their victories would ultimately serve their masters. Another chapter details the discussion between Rotigus and Kugarth, two great unclean ones who are second and first in Nurgle's favour respectively. Rotigus refers to Kugarth as currently first in favour, a thinly veiled threat to the Plague Father, before helping to improve his Plague Brew. This contradiction may seem odd. However, Kugarth's sworn loyalty to Mortarion is known within demonkind, and it appears that Rotigus is helping Kugarth damn himself alongside Mortarion's fate, and helping to drastically shake things up in the Nurglite hierarchy. It is this sense of change which is important to the suggestion of a 40k end times. It genuinely feels as if the old status quo, the idea of stasis and repetition, has been thrown out of the window, especially if demon primarchs are at risk of losing the blessings of their gods. Overall, there is this sense of a great narrative boulder that is beginning to roll downhill and is picking up momentum. My prediction of an oncoming 40k end times is not just limited to the revelations in Godblight, but from the numerous lore implications I'm beginning to notice in many of the Space Marine focused books and stories, such as the existence of a Tau god in the Warp and the direct relationship between Alfarius and Constantine Valdor. But those are aspects of the lore which I will address in their own video. I have been Invictor Lorestrom. Thank you for listening.